It was a Tuesday in May 2017 when hospital monitors in the UK started to stutter. A small clinic in the north blinked, then a larger medical center. Screens froze, printers coughed, scanners went mute. On every monitor, the same brutal sentence: your files have been encrypted. Pay to get them back. Surgeons canceled operations, ambulances were diverted, nurses and doctors stood at terminals that no longer spoke to the machines that saved lives. The thing that made the nightmare unbearable was not only the scale, but the provenance. The digital instrument being used to hold ordinary institutions hostage was built from code that had once been cataloged in America's deepest archives of cyber tools. A weapon forged by one of the most secretive intelligence forces on the planet had leaked into the wild. And once it was free, ordinary criminals turned it into a global hammer. The arsenal. Inside the NSA's high-security compounds, a small cadre of hackers built tools the public would never see. They called their division Tailored Access Operations. Within that, an almost mythical cell, referred to by analysts as the Equation Group, developed bespoke exploits and clandestine implants, software so precise it could slip past an air-gapped machine or hide inside legitimate traffic. These were not rough sketches, but engineered instruments. Zero-day exploits that attacked unpatched vulnerabilities, backdoors that opened and closed like trapdoors, and maintenance tools with names that sounded like science fiction. Dark Pulsar, Eternal Romance, Double Pulsar. For an operator in that world, a single exploit was more valuable than armies of code. It was an entry key into other people's networks, a way to lift secrets quietly and, if ordered, to break things with surgical accuracy. The logic was chillingly simple. Hold the unknown vulnerability as a weapon rather than patch it. Keep it for intelligence operations. In theory, the balance favored national security. In practice, accumulating a library of attacks created a stockpile that, if captured, could be repurposed by anyone who could read the files. Picture the server rooms where those weapons lived. Locked racks, badge readers, and air-conditioned silence. Imagine as well the human side. Contractors, cleared analysts, nights of classified chatter and operational planning. The tools were guarded like crown jewels. But the more precious something is, the more tempting it becomes. That temptation would prove, in an ugly way, contagious. The leak and the fallout. Out of nowhere in 2016, an account began posting in broken English on a fringe site. The author called themselves the Shadow Brokers. At first, it read like a prank, someone claiming they had stolen NSA code and offering a sample for sale. Skeptics shrugged. Then code appeared that carried unmistakable hallmarks: internal strings, classification patterns, fingerprints that forensic analysts later traced back to Equation Group toolsets. The initial auction was a farce, an asking price so absurd few took it seriously. But the sample was real. Patches were rushed. Vendors patched vulnerable protocols. Then trouble escalated. Months of taunting posts followed. The shadow brokers dripped additional files, revealed lists of servers the agency had probed, and mocked the idea that anyone inside Fort Meade could be blind to the theft. Agencies hunted. The FBI executed a dramatic raid on a quiet house in Maryland and arrested Harold Martin, a contractor who had collected terabytes of classified material. For a moment, investigators believed they had clamped the leak, but the posts continued. The flow of stolen tools didn't stop. Whoever had helped themselves to the arsenal had likely shared it beyond a single person. Then came April 2017. A password mysteriously appeared on the Shadow Brokers blog. It unlocked an encrypted archive they had teased months earlier. A digital Pandora's box spilled across public servers. The contents included some of the NSA's most potent remaining exploits, among them code labeled Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar, two tools that engage deep flaws in a ubiquitous Microsoft service and a backdoor that could drop payloads remotely. Within weeks, the world saw what happens when secrecy breaks. Scripts built from those exploits were patched together by criminal groups and nation actors alike. A worm, designed originally to spread without user interaction, was cobbled from the leaked pieces and launched into the internet's arteries. On May 12th, the ransomware called WannaCry detonated. WannaCry was brutal because it combined an encryption payload with a self-propagation mechanism. It scanned for machines that still exposed a legacy file-sharing protocol and then forced its way in. Once inside, it encrypted local data and then replicated itself to the next vulnerable host. Hospitals, universities, and businesses were not prepared. In one stark scene, the operating theater at a hospital went dark. Patient records inaccessible, imaging systems offline. A culture of care suddenly degraded into triage by pen and paper. Within weeks, the tally read like a geography of damage. Hundreds of thousands of infected systems across more than 100 countries. Critical services were slowed or stopped. Freight companies rerouted shipments. Pharmacies could not access dispensing records. The authors of WannaCry demanded only cryptocurrency ransoms, but the indirect costs, lost hours, canceled treatments, reputational damage, were immeasurable. And then, less than a month later, another storm hit. NotPetya appeared like a strain of ransomware at first glance, but was far uglier. Intentionally destructive code masked as extortion. It began in an infected update of legitimate accounting software widely used in Ukraine, then leveraged the same leaked Windows exploit to sweep outward. Corporations with global footprints, shipping giants, pharmaceutical manufacturers, logistics firms, suffered cascading outages. One multinational company had to reinstall thousands of servers from scratch. Another halted production lines for days. The economic damage ran into the billions. The pattern was stark and terrifying. An intelligence agency's retained exploit became the vector for two of the most disruptive cyber incidents of the modern era. What had been held for clandestine advantage now worked as an accelerant for global disruption. The aftermath and the question of identity. When the smoke cleared, governments and companies scrambled to patch systems and assign blame. Regulators fined firms for failing to protect data. Boards demanded new security postures. The debate turned to policy. Should intelligence agencies retain stockpiles of 0 days, or should they disclose vulnerabilities to vendors so they can be fixed? But alongside policy arguments, a narrower and murkier mystery persisted. Who were the shadow brokers? Theories proliferated like rumors in a blackout. Some veterans whispered that the leak had the hallmarks of a foreign intelligence service, precisely the sort of operation a state would run. Quietly compromise a staging server that intelligence operators used as a temporary cache, and then exfiltrate the tools for later exploitation. Edward Snowden, watching from exile, suggested the pattern looked like a nation-state operation, perhaps Russian. Others focused on insiders. The arrest of Harold Martin showed that contractors could and did hoard classified data, sometimes with little oversight. Linguistic analysts noted the shadow broker's English, stylized and sometimes inconsistent, could be a cover, native speakers faking accents or foreign operators designed to appear less sophisticated. Motives ranged across the spectrum: political theater, profit, ideological outrage, or a deliberate campaign to undermine American intelligence influence. No single theory enjoyed consensus. That uncertainty was part of the damage. If your adversary is inscrutable, maybe a foreign intelligence service, maybe a small gang of opportunists, how do you defend against the next breach? And crucially, how do you secure an arsenal whose very existence invites theft? Behind the closed doors of the intelligence community, the answer was to retreat and repair. Internal processes tightened, access logs were scrutinized, and the romance of accumulating unpatched vulnerabilities waned under the hard light of consequences. In public, officials warned of the dangers posed by the leak and called for better coordination between governments and private tech firms. But the world had already changed. Once Eternal Blue and its siblings were free, they were effectively immortal, copied, modified, and reborn in forms no one could fully control. The shadow brokers faded from the front pages. Their identity remains an open file. The worms and wipers that followed, however, left scars. Companies rebuilt networks, legislators wrote new rules, hospitals rewired contingency plans. In the end, The Shadow Brokers saga is not just about stolen code or a single group of unknown actors. It is a parable about the fragility of concentrated power. When the tools of offensive cyberwar escape into general circulation, the line between statecraft and chaos collapses. Weapons made for secrecy become instruments of disruption. The agency that once hunted in the dark must confront the possibility of being hunted in turn. And somewhere, the machines hum on. Patches installed, logs rotating, security teams on alert. Because in the digital age, the next leak is never a question of if, only when.